Get a good look? This is the new thing on our city streets. Money. Street name cash. Kids as young as 11 years old are being paid off with this shit for doing chores. Some kids don't do anything. They get an allowance. First time's free, kid gets hooked, spends the rest of his life chasing this shit right here. Gets what's known in the streets as a job. Some get into the heavier shit like careers. We believe most of the money being manufactured in the UK comes from here, the Royal Mint, which itself is a division of this place, the Houses of Parliament, one of the largest criminal organizations in the country today. It is our job to overthrow this system.
Hello everyone, and in today's video I'm going to be joined by a comedian, satirist and all-around funny guy, Will Franken. So Will, how are you doing today? And thanks for taking the time to chat to me. I really appreciate it.
No, it's good to be here.
So I guess we can start off with a few questions on your comedy. How would you define your style of comedy, Will? I guess it'd be more or less politically incorrect, I guess.
Well, yeah, I'm politically incorrect by default. I mean, I just, usually if you tell me that I can't do something, that means I have to do it. And I think that's been a guiding principle for my whole life. Structurally, I always tell people it's a one-man Monty Python show. Just because that's the overall structure is, just going from idea to idea. My characters usually have a shelf life of about 3 minutes. So, I introduce them, they make a point, and then I kill them off and go on to the next thing. Which when I was a kid, when I saw Python, that was very influential on me. To see somebody move that, to see a sketch troupe move that quickly from idea to idea. And, but politically incorrect just because, I don't know, I say this thing about political correctness that some people are politically correct say, they'll say, you're just putting on it's a persona, political incorrectness. But I actually say the political incorrectness is the shedding of a persona. It's the political correctness that's the lie.
Yeah.
So even though I do characters, they're very honest characters because I want to make a point about something,
And that's quite a good point, yeah. So you grew up in small state Missouri, which, to the best of my knowledge, is not really a hotbed of comedy, or is it? Maybe it is.
Well, there's just not much to do there. I mean, I had to, and I think maybe that contributed to me, being funny, is that I had to find ways to entertain myself, And I sometimes I think that if I wasn't born in a big cosmopolitan city, I might go in a totally different way, But because I was bored, I had necessity is the mother of invention. And so I grew up, it was a big wheat field behind my house, and I would watch television and then go walk around in the field by myself and just talk to myself.
Okay.
So it was good to come where I come from, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's a certain style of Midtown American humor that perhaps we don't often get to see on the TV.
Well, I think I do. My influences are all British.
Oh.
And what weirded me out was that, I finally got to realize my dream would come into Britain, and I realized that most British comedians working today are doing a really bad version of shitty American comedy. And, it is kind of heartbreaking to think that because of political correctness and identity politics and all this other stuff, that the Britons have kind of forsaken their own comedic heritage. See, where I grew up, we didn't have anything at all like British comedy, and so PBS was America's version of the BBC. It was state-funded television, and they would show Python episodes, and but the thing was, where I come from, nobody would watch them. It was just kind of what they call long hair stuff. Like if you listen to classical music where I come from, they'd say, "What do you listen to that long hair stuff for?"
Okay, so that must have been fairly frustrating then. Okay.
Well, to some extent, but also it was nice because I felt more like an individual. Okay. Like I was carving out something for myself that nobody else could understand, which I quite liked, I think.
So I guess that's what brought you to the UK then. If you kind of had a calling, really.
Oh, I worshipped this country from afar for many years.
Okay. And so how did you end up in the UK then? What was the date that you arrived, and what was the process?
It was in 2007. I guess I was getting it was funny because I auditioned for David Letterman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I auditioned for David Letterman, knowing full well that they wouldn't take me, but I did it anyway. And the guy it was the booker for David Letterman was there in the audience, and this guy was really good. And I met industry people before. I never really liked them because I don't like those LA types, but this guy was really good. And after my audition or performance, or whatever, he took me aside and David, do you like to go to England? That's what I would prefer. And this guy arranged for me to come out in 2007 and do a TV show called The World Stands Up. So that was my first time in England in 2007, 6 days out here. But in 2012, some guy from LA had seen some footage of me on YouTube or something, and he produced my first run at the Fringe. And then I realized, fuck it, I should just be staying out here, in the UK. And that's pretty much how it happened.
Okay. And would you say, when you're performing in the UK, what differences are there in the two audiences, American and UK?
I mean, I've not performed in America for so long, but it just depends where you are in the UK. Like, Londoners tend to be very stiff usually, and the PC rot has really set in London more than anywhere else. But I still think the British audiences are a little bit more comfortable with weirdness. Mm-hmm. And I had a theory that what once made British comedy so great was that because a lot of the British, I think, are very repressed emotionally, that the weirdness when the weirdness does come out, it's much more colorful, mm-hmm. because there's so much societal repression about not showing emotions, that when you do finally get a chance to express yourself artistically or comedically, it comes across very, very beautiful. And I think there's a little bit more leeway for surrealism and just outright weirdness, absurdity with the Brits. Okay.
I'm wondering, is this recording? But as I said, I have this as a second, my thing. It's as I said, this YouTube, this new Skype thing.
Are you recording simultaneously on two things then?
Yeah, because
okay.
Sometimes you can't trust this Skype. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
No
I'm a bit like yourself. I'm not great with technology.
I despise technology.
It keeps saying it started recording, but
have you read John Waters' new book?
No, my mother's after ordering it, and she's reading it first, and she'll send it over.
Is she a fan as well?
Sorry?
She a fan of his as well?
Yeah, and she said it's quite a thick book, so she's only on the second or third chapter, so I don't know.
Well, it's all about him as a Luddite.
Yeah.
And if you haven't read that essay of his where he describes the first time he found out what email was, it's hysterical. Okay. He wrote an essay called In Defense of Postman Pat, and he was talking about people who send him hate email. Mm-hmm. And he said, if you really want to say something to me, you can get a piece of paper and some stamps and go down. He explained how
mm-hmm.
that back in the good old days, if you hated somebody, you really had to put in some effort
mm-hmm.
to express your disgust. Mm-hmm. And nobody wants to do that anymore. And the internet has made it easy for people just to, think they're kind of equals with the targets of their animosity. Mm-hmm. Because all they have to do is just comment, and grammar's irrelevant, and all this stuff's irrelevant. And, but back in the good old days, you would actually have to pen a letter and hope that the person read it.
Yeah. What has been the reaction of British audiences to your style of humour then?
It's been really good. The people that I have upset are the people that control the bookings. I broke the unwritten rule, which is you're not supposed to address even if you're a comedian, you can't address the fact that there's a problem in comedy. And that's what I did in 2016, and kind of paid for it with the work drying up and stuff like that, because I kind of went after the frail egos of the comedians. Mm-hmm. It's the comedians who are destroying comedy, and it's the idea that everybody and their mother should be doing comedy, mm-hmm. just by virtue of them saying that they're comedians. That is killing comedy. Mm-hmm. And in that scenario, it only helps the bad comedians because it says that they're equal, and it hurts the good comedians because it says that they're equal. So this rampant egalitarianism is gutting comedy.
Okay, so
then you add in the PC element and the identity politics and all this stuff too, and it just continues. And another thing too, with these nights like Comedy Unleashed, whatever, you're getting a lot of people now who are pretending to be right wing or to have conservative viewpoints, and it's just a really depressing business venture sometimes.
Yeah, I've seen that on the internet. People pretending not to be on the alternative right and being kind of edgy, but you can always tell when they get to positions of like in TV or something, they kind of tone it down immediately.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Well, you know what the big litmus test is, I think, is Tommy Robinson.
Yeah.
So if you ask a lot of these so-called right-wing comedians, well, I don't like Tommy Robinson, they'll draw the line at something like Tommy Robinson. You know, which to me, I'm a Tommy fan because you know he's actually saying something that I think is very important, and I think he fucks off a lot of so-called right-wing comedians because he doesn't do it with polish. You know, he's a working-class guy from Luton, and you know, but you'll see a lot of these frauds will actually draw the line, and you know, for all their brazen freedom of speech stuff, they'll you know somebody like Tommy who's actually practicing freedom of speech and paying for it, they'll draw a line in the sand there. So. A lot of people, it's a business. You know, that's the thing. For me, it never was a business. It was a calling. You know. Yeah,
well, that's true. So the Edinburgh Fringe, then that you took that to the Edinburgh Fringe. You did an anti-award ceremony.
Yeah.
So what was that exactly?
Well, it's funny. The Fringe that year, I'd done four Fringes at that point, and every year I wanted to win the award because I thought that I was the most fringe. You know, but every year we go to like the lesbian show or the eating disorder shit or whatever, you know. And I remember that year I saw on the Fringe brochure that their motto was defying the norm, and it had a picture of an owl in bondage gear, and I just immediately thought they're defining the norm. They're not defying. It's a business enterprise. It's a God, I mean, how much money goes through the Fringe every year? You know, the money, the posters, all this shit. And then I designed my own flyer that year. It was a really weird show, and I sent it to my friend who does flyers for a living, and she emailed back and she said the font must be the same on both sides. It was a whole list of musts. And I remember thinking, I'm not a man of must, you know, and then I said, no, I am going to. It was really weird. It was about 3 days before the festival. I said, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to go up there, and in the night time, I'm going to perform my show. And then during the day, I'm going to go out and review shows that I think might be contenders to win awards on blandness and mediocrity. So, and it was a really prolonged joke. You know, I reviewed the shows. I got Spiked magazine sponsored it. We had 23 categories, nominations. And then at the end of the festival, it was a ceremony in Calton Hill. Just like a really drab. There were hymns and everything. I was dressed like a vicar, and I think we had about 50 people showed up for the ceremony.
Okay, I suppose that's not too bad, really.
Not bad. I lost a lot of work. I got to tell you, I went from my work was cut probably about 75 to 80%. You know.
With the song "Our Souls Are Broken."
Our souls are broken.
Our souls.
Our souls. Yeah.
Every single one of them.
Yeah, mine's broken. It is, darling.
1, 2, 3. Our souls are broken. No one can fix us. Our dreams distorted. This is such a shine.
Name of blandness, safety, and political correctness.
Ho hum.
The tedium of the Edinburgh Festival Fringe and the approval of the industry and the community of 1,000 comedians be with you.
And also with you.
Brothers and sisters, let us acknowledge our originality and so prepare ourselves to celebrate the sacred awards. I confess to almighty industry and to you, my brothers and sisters, that I have committed experimentation, taken risks in my shows and in my club sets.
But I haven't.
Therefore, I ask blessed BBC, all the promoters and the PR
ladies, and you, my brothers and sisters, to pray for me to the industry, our God.
You were sent to heal the world of free speech,
Blandness, have mercy.
Blandness, have mercy.
You came to reward the mundane. Safety, have mercy.
Safety, have mercy.
You are seated at the right hand of the new television commissioner to approve pilots. Blandness, have mercy.
Blandness, have mercy.
May the Almighty Ordinary have mercy on us, forgive us our controversy, and bring us to everlasting boredom.
Ho, ho.
Ethnic and gender diversity is fine for the fringe, but diversity of political opinion is decidedly taboo. The Guardian of Liberalism Award celebrates the uniformity of political outlook that is the hallmark of today's comedy bubble. And the nominees are Bilal Zafar, Cakes. Chris Coltrane, Socialist Fun Times. Joe Wells, 10 Things I Hate About You, Kip. Nish Kumar, actions speak louder than words unless you shout the words real loud. Atif Nawaz, Artificial Intelligence. And the winner is Chris Coltrane, Socialist Fun Times.
When all else fails, look to your gender for inspiration for your show. The I Am a Woman Award celebrates women who think of themselves as women first and artists second. And the nominees are Woman Up Improv Show, Shella Quint, Adventures in Menstruation with Shella Quint, Louisa O'Million, What Would Beyonce Do? Am I right, ladies? Kate Smurthwaite on masculinity, and Samantha Presti, Sextremist.
Hey.
And the winner is Samantha Presti.
I've been waiting 5 years for this.
I think we found the first feminist with a sense of humor. Miss Samantha Presley. Astounding.
Well, I mean, it seems to me comedians generally are a sensitive bunch, you know, despite the front,
Yeah.
I guess, you know. I mean, they obsess about reviews and, you know,
Oh, yeah.
feedback, and there's a lot of jealousy. I mean,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
so you said there was a lot of you were blacklisted and you got a lot of negativity over that, but I mean, is that still occurring today, or do you think they've mellowed out a bit, or?
No, I mean, there's people that will never work with me again. And you know, there's a guy I used to work. You know,
Have they got no sense of humor?
Manchester.
Sorry, have they got no sense of humor?
That's one thing that I think the awards proved. Another thing that I always go back to is the fact that I've got hate. It always came like in little drips and drabs. Like, you know, Charlie Hebdo would happen, and I would say, where the fuck are the comedians? You know, why are we not making fun of Islam? And then you get the hatred from like little pockets of people saying, you know, the same old bullshit about those aren't really Muslims that did Charlie Hebdo, blah blah blah. And but when I did those awards, it was a fucking tidal wave. And when the nominations were published, I think 3 days before the festival was over, I felt it was really weird. Once you get that much hatred, you almost kind of feel immune to it. Because before, if it was just one thing like Charlie Hebdo, I'd jump in and I'd argue and fight. But with this, it was like, you know, there's no way I can deal with the amount of hatred I'm getting. It was everybody, Richard Herring, Stuart Lee. I had big names, small names, and nothing, all it was social media bitching. You know, and the thing was, they all knew when the ceremony was going to be. They had the date, the time, everything. And so when I showed up to do this ceremony, because I'd gotten so much online hatred over this thing, I expected there to be some pushback, and not a single. Like there was nothing. There was no counter response. There was no comedic counter response, and I think that really proves something, that you could have the entire collection of UK comedians in the same town at the same time, all outraged over these awards, and yet they didn't do anything. And you know, I saw a few people saying, "Well, it was midday on a Sunday, you know, at the Fringe." So you know, they were kind of defending why they didn't show up and actually protest or come up with a counter response, which to me just proved that they weren't actually comedians.
Well, it's easier. It's easier to attack you as a person rather than what you're doing.
Oh, they did that as well. They some people said I think he's bipolar. I think he's having a breakdown. Some people brought the fact that I lived as a woman for 7 months, and they had to do all of this stuff because the truth was they didn't want to say the truth, which was that they're just shit.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's true.
People go out doing shows called Adventures in Menstruating, and then they wonder why they were nominated for I Am a Woman award.
Okay. So let me see. So your comedy is what? I don't know. Would you class it alt-right, or I mean, I like to say common sense kind of viewpoints. I mean, I think people get pigeonholed when they say alt-right. You know, I mean, for me, it's just common sense politics, really.
Well, see, when I first heard alt-right, because I don't like all this new terminology now. Like, there's all sorts of weird words now, like ziz, zer, turf, and all this stuff, and emojis and all this bullshit, you know. And when alt-right came out, I just assumed that meant alternative right. And I thought that meant like people like me who wear badges and listen to the Kinks, but we also have conservative leaning. And then somewhere along the way, somebody told me that meant like white supremacism. So then I became reticent to use that term. But
yeah.
I think when you say common sense, I agree with you. Like, that's the humor, right? Like, I got this bit about this transgender woman who has prostate cancer, but she sues to have her GPs call it breast cancer, and the doctors are now required by law to say that she has a misplaced tit in her arm.
Is that true?
But the thing is, it could be, and so when I do that, that's a common sense. It's a common sense bit.
Yeah.
And all this other shit with the PC and the changing the language or whatever, that's not common sense.
Yeah. Well,
that's academic bullshit that's churned out, and it makes us think that the idea is to make us think that we're crazy because we don't believe that if you have a penis, you can be a woman.
Yeah.
And the whole gimmick is to make us think that we've lost our minds.
Yeah.
You know? That's what I say about satire. So, I mean, you've read A Modest Proposal, right?
No.
A 10-page essay, right?
Okay.
And Jonathan Swift wrote a piece explaining how to cure the starvation problem in Ireland.
Oh, yeah.
And he gives recipes for how to cook a child, and it's done in this flowery 18th century language. And he makes such a vicious point about the English treatment of the Irish at that time. You know, with how to flay the carcass to make fine ladies' gloves. You know, and a piece like that. The thing is, nowadays we're actually living satire. We're living in the day and age where we would actually cook children to solve starvation and then call it humanitarian, call it a humanitarian movement, because we're actually living satire. We're living in an age where men have penises and Islam is a race, not a religion, The culture is mad, and I think the job of any comedian nowadays is to go out and bombard people with common sense to try to cure this madness.
Yeah. Well, it ties in with a few of the questions I was going to ask you. I mean, with the nature of comedy these days, there's a few different types of it. What I see is like, I mean, you have the liberal talk show kind of thing with Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, and what I get from that is, I mean, I don't mind their views, but they're not very funny.
No.
I mean, I can stand some of their political viewpoints, but because they're so full of hatred and it's anger, they forget about the one important thing in comedy is meant to make you laugh, Yeah. And I don't find any of those TV shows. I think, and I think they're losing viewers by the millions. I don't think what they're doing is working.
Oh, especially with the internet. I mean, there's no need to tune into any of this stuff anymore. I don't know who's watching it myself, but or like Mock the Week out here, or Have I Got News for You?
Yeah.
I can't imagine anybody's actually watching this. I think it's just a big inside joke for the BBC.
Yeah, and then you have the other side of comedy. It's like it's profanity ridden. It's low brow jokes and like Frankie Boyle, Jim Jeffries. In Ireland, we'd have Tommy Tiernan, and yes, I find them they can be entertaining at times, but I find them they get to a point where you think they're going to break through to the next level and maybe start talking about some government policies, you know, making fun of that, but they never get to that level because then they get their TV shows in the BBC or what's Jim Jeffries, Comedy Central, or or in Tommy Tiernan's case, RTE. So then it's just you know, that's it. That's the end of their rebellious streak. I find, you know.
I just became aware of Frankie Boyle recently. Did you ever follow him?
Yeah, I was a big follower of him. I'm more so his books. I mean, I think some of his comedy shows were a bit.
But the thing with him, that this is the fascinating thing that I've just become aware of, is that the dead baby jokes and the I'm so dark and all the stuff like that. Then somewhere along the way, they kind of like, in a means of career preservation, they become Guardian columnists.
Yeah.
And feminists. They turn on a dime, and I'm seeing a lot of this lately, especially with on the other end of things, like the people becoming the right wingers all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well, they're allowed to push the boat so far, but not enough.
Well, I think it's preservation. I think there comes a moral choice where it's just like, okay, I'm dark, I'm Frankie Boyle, I'm dark, and then it's like, oh shit, I want to stay relevant and still get gigs. This is the way the wind is blowing, so I'm going to be this now. And it's weird how people seem to forgive some and not the others, if you know what I mean.
So as that, like you've been on, I've seen you on BBC and you've been on Sky TV and you did that radio show that was very good recently. I mean, do you be told beforehand when you go on the shows, well, we don't want you to talk about this, or can you go a little soft on this issue, or I mean, did they immediately try and censor you?
No. It's funny because you're talking about the radio show with Radio 5. It's funny, before when they booked me, they said, yeah, you voted for Trump, and I said, yeah, and they said, yeah, so this will be exciting, and just and they make it sound like they actually want me on the show because to raise a little hell. And that happened with Sky too, and that they're actually booking me because I'm a Trump voter, and they want the fireworks. They want somebody, it's television or radio. They want some kind of entertainment, and I feel like with the radio one, the Adrian Childs program, I felt like they probably regretted that, because they didn't know, because I'm from Missouri and I'm white trash and I'm a bit louder than they probably expected. I think what they wanted was like a Jeff Norcott, like kind of a nice, well-behaved right-wing person.
Yeah.
Just to do a nice little badminton match with Deborah Francis White, just, a nice little volley. But, I come in there like a wrecking ball and mash it up sometimes. Well, I think Sky likes me, but I think BBC maybe not so much.
Yeah, well, that's the way to do it. I mean, I think if you go in with a soft approach, you're going to get eaten alive, and then you see people apologizing. I mean, you never apologize.
No.
You keep on the track. This is because you're only lying to yourself, and that's the first mistake,
That's right.
We're joined by the comedian Will Franken. Will, good to speak to you. First of all, both the Trump blimp, the Sadiq Khan blimp, do you think they're funny?
I think the Sadiq Khan one is extremely funny because especially because with the yellow bikini, it gets to a policy of his that I found quite repulsive, which is the idea that if you're offended by a tube advert, it has to come down. So I think the irony is, if he did want to ban that particular blimp, he could say that because it's in a bikini, it's a bit of body shaming. But he didn't. He's allowing it to fly, and I think that one is pretty funny, actually. The Trump one I felt was a bit obvious, but maybe that's because I'm a Trump voter, so I might be a bit biased. And I did think it was a little bit ironic that Trump was in a nappy. And therefore to fly a balloon was kind of childish in and of itself, but it's good. It's tit for tat. It's quite nice.
Yeah, so you're quite happy with the fact that, I mean, he was in a rock. He wasn't actually in a rock and a hard place, was he? The London mayor had to approve this, really.
He had to approve it. It was kind of a foregone conclusion. I mean, it could have been. I think he probably didn't expect it. My hunch is that he didn't expect there to be kind of a reprisal like this, and it might have been. It's kind of comic to imagine him thinking. Oh, they want to fly a balloon to me? Yeah, freedom of speech. Yeah, why not?
And is that what this is to you, Will? Do you think it is broadly about freedom of speech above anything else?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. When I found out about this this morning, I'm a very politically incorrect comedian, and so for me it was kind of a sigh of relief because, you know, I dearly love this country, but it doesn't have a free speech amendment like it does in the States. And so there's always this question of, is this okay? Is this all right? And there's always a bit of nebulousness around what free speech is out here. And so by floating a balloon of the Muslim mayor of London, to me, it's really quality. So I was really relieved to see that. I could breathe a sigh of relief.
I sent you, I don't know, did you get to see it? I sent you a link. Kate, what's her name? Kate Smirtwaite. Smirtwaite. She was. Did you get to see it? She was on Russia Today with Lionel. I don't know his second name, but he has his blog, Lionel Nation. He's very good.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And there was a case. What was the case there? They're talking about a story of a comedian forced to sign an agreement that they had to joke respectfully at a gig, and so there couldn't be any anti-women,
Konstantin Kissin. You know him? Well, I mentioned him. He was this little weedy fucker in a sports jacket who I met at the Battle of Ideas this past October. And the panel was on, is comedy too safe? During the panel, he says, well, I mean, I'm a businessman, you know, as well, because I actually run a comedy night. I'm a businessman, you know, and as a businessman, I wouldn't book somebody controversial like Will Franken. And I'm just sitting there, did you just admit that you wouldn't book me? You're the problem. You are the enemy, you know? I wouldn't book somebody controversial like Will Franken, because God knows I want to have a nice, safe, ordinary night, and I just want to get out of there in one piece with a few quid, you know. Sitting next to me, he says, "Oh, you wouldn't book me because you're a businessman." I think you have a failed business model, you know, because any good businessman that's gone down in history has taken risks. You know, Brian Epstein took a huge risk. You know, whoever managed Richard Pryor, I'm sure he went through lots of different managers, but, you know, people took a risk once upon a time. You're not a businessman. You are a businessman, but you're one of those cowardly types that, what's everybody else doing? I'll do that too and give it a different name. Right? And then I had a nice callback because at the end of the panel, he says, he's answering a question from an audience member. He says, well, the thing is, I mean, if I were to book a controversial comedian, and I picked up my microphone and said, which you won't, which got a huge laugh. It was a nice callback to the fact that he basically acknowledged that he wouldn't. So what's the point of the hypothesis if it's, you know, it's a faulty hypothesis because there is no if there. You won't. You just admitted that you won't do this. So he's a coward. He's a pussy. So anyway, apparently this fucker a week ago, because now he's part of the Comedy Unleashed crowd, you know. Comedy Unleashed, you know, free speech, no censorship, you know. Now he's part of that lot because he wants a spot. Right? Comedians all want a spot. But there's certainly, an artist won't compromise, right? I mean, maybe there's a way I could just, maybe people are that stupid that, I mean, maybe I could flip and say, you know, I'm a huge Corbyn supporter, you know, and look, man, I'm totally behind the Me Too movement 110%, you know, and I got to tell you, I think there's a lot of Islamophobia in the world right now, you know, and it took me a while to see this, but, you know, so my new show, Will Franken, Join in the Soup, is going to be playing at the, you know, but I can't do that because I'm an artist. And I can't do anything that goes actually against my artistic convictions. But I think a lot of people are stupid. And that's how you can flip. I think people who flip like that all of a sudden and say, no, I've never been that way. But, you know I was offensive to women before, but now I'm Frankie Boyle, the Guardian columnist. Right? They can flip like that because maybe people actually are stupid. So I see on Twitter he's got this, he was going to play a gig, I think at a university, and they sent him a kind of a contract that he had signed about safe spaces and, you know, that shit, the trigger warning shit, and they wanted him to sign it. And so he posts this thing, I'm not going to sign this thing about what I can say and not say at a gig. I'm Konstantin Kissin, I have balls of steel. And he's, you know, like a pussy, he's crossed out the name of the institution, you know. He's blanked it out, and he's put this image up. I'm not going to sign this. Now he's become a cause celeb for, you know, Comedy Unleashed is, you know, like, this freedom of speech is at stake here. This is a media storm. This fucker Constantine was in the Daily Mail, BBC. He was on talking about this, refusing to sign this letter, and I'm just, you know, and I'm just fuming, and I go like, I know I don't want to engage, you know, so I was just trying to stay away from it. The more. Yeah, so a couple of days went by, and I did a gig at Comedy Unleashed. Was it last Tuesday? And, you know, they said, oh, did you hear about Konstantin? And I said, what do you mean? Yeah, with the letter and the safe spaces? Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, just, you know, like, what, free speech? And I said, yeah, but you remember this fucker, like back in October, you were on the panel. Back in October, do you remember the fucker saying that he wouldn't book somebody controversial like me? But you don't look at this as scams? You gotta watch out for these fuckers. This is a guy that, the wind's blowing this way. Oh, safe spaces. I'm not gonna sign this contract. I have balls of steel. Yeah. So I just tried to keep my mouth shut. And it was funny, my girlfriend was showing me the story about this fucker on the Daily Mail, like, brave comedian stands up, freedom of speech. And then I checked my own email, and then it was an email. I'm on the Comedy Unleashed mailing list, and it was media storm, and it was like this Constantine. The fucker who said he wouldn't book somebody controversial like Will Franken. So he gets a letter from a university saying, please sign and agree not to be offensive or whatever. And then, blacked out the things just in case he does want to work with them down the road, because ka-ching, ka-ching, And big Brad, and I said, I can't take this anymore. So I go on Facebook and I said, like, does anybody remember this pussy said that he wouldn't book somebody controversial like me? This is just a fucker who's discovered a different direction the wind was blowing in. So that's my big beef. I know that guy very well, and he's exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about this duplicity thing. Mm-hmm. Back in October, we were on a panel at the Battle of Ideas in London, and he publicly admitted that he's a businessman and he therefore wouldn't book somebody as controversial as me.
Okay.
And what he's done is, because this Comedy Unleashed thing has become a big comedy night, right? And comedians always want a gig. They always want money and a spot on the bill. I played there a couple of days ago, and they had about 200 in. It was a massive show. Mm. This guy is such a preening little coward that, that's the problem with social media. You can't actually punch these people.
Okay, so we're talking about the organizer now, yeah?
We're talking about that guy. His name's Konstantin Kissin, the little Russian guy.
Okay.
And he got this thing, I guess, from the university or wherever that wanted him to sign this agreement, and he, in his mind, thought, "Oh, this is a chance to show that I'm actually a brave man. I'm a true artist, or whatever."
Okay.
But we've got video and audio footage of him admitting his cowardice back in October. Okay. That he wouldn't book somebody as controversial as me because he's a businessman. But now he's got this little piece of paper that says, I'm not going to sign this. I believe in freedom of speech. And these are the frauds, I think, even more than the left-wing guys now, that we really have to watch out for. Mm. These Johnny-come-latelys that are banging on about freedom of speech. When, where the fuck were they during Charlie Hebdo? Where the fuck was this guy during Charlie Hebdo? I'd like to know. Mm. Did he write anything about Charlie Hebdo? Has he been doing anything about jihad or FGM? I seriously doubt it. My hunch is that this is just some little white bread nobody that has this piece of paper, which to him represents bravery. He wants to have his cake and eat it too.
Well, Lionel Nation made the good point on the show that if this is the way the comedy's going down, you're going to kill the audience, because no audience. I mean, you go to comedy to be entertained. It's a bit edgy. It's a bit dark. There's jokes that probably close to the bone, but you don't just go and sit down and get a lecture. You don't want to sit in a political lecture of what you should and should not think, So you're not going to get an audience. You said you had 200 people, and you're probably getting decent crowds. The comedy people want to hear.
Well, that's the thing, though. But this Comedy Unleashed show, it initially was set up, I think, about a year ago as an antidote to the predictable liberal agenda, the predictable blandness, and whatever. And that's the thing. When something becomes popular, everybody. So, like about a year ago, this guy Konstantin wouldn't have had anything to do with it because it was experimental. But now that it's generated some steam, what comedian doesn't want to be on the bill?
Okay.
And so he's got. This is his moment in the sun because he got this little piece of paper. But if he's going to say that he's not going to book somebody like me because I'm controversial, that paper means nothing. That's just him making some stand, because look, he's gotten on the BBC and the Daily Mail, and he's getting his name out there. I mean, so many people do things out of publicity.
Yeah.
And what fucks me up is most of my career I've done everything out of conviction. I do what I think is funny. By and large, people have liked it over the years, and but it's all been conviction. I can't write a bit, for example, about something that I don't agree with. If I wrote a Brexit bit, it would be about, which I have. It's about the snobbery of the Remainers towards the Leave voters. I wouldn't be able to write a bit the other way because I don't believe. I don't believe in Remain, so I wouldn't be able to write a pro-Remain bit. I think people like Konstantin could actually write. They could write both. He could sit down and write a pro-Brexit bit, and then he could could write an anti-Brexit bit,
Yeah.
and it'd be the same difference to him, because at the end of the day, there's nothing there. There's no comedic spark in him. There's no principle. There's no conviction.
Yeah.
If you can willingly say that you would, with somebody with my credentials, with the backing of Robin Williams, Stuart Lee before my politics became out, Matt Lucas, I've got a whole Harry Hill, I've got a list of people. If you can willingly say that pedigree means nothing, and then turn around and all of a sudden say, what is this? This university wants me to sign a disclosure agreement. That's a person with no conviction.
Yeah.
Those are scary people. Those are the kind of people that get in power and say Brexit means Brexit, and then turn to, they're the Theresa Mays of the comedy world. They're empty husks. They're nothing.
Yeah.
Give me a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, boring liberal comedian on about Jeremy Corbyn any day over this new shit.
Yeah.
You have to watch out for the people. They have two faces.
So, your one Kate Smartweight, anyway, Smartweight, what name? But there's a few things about that, because I wasn't going to talk about it, but it came up, I seen it yesterday, and I thought it was very good. Because I know you're into your comedy and thinking about the structure of comedy, but she was introduced as a political activist and comedian, and it goes back to what you're saying. I mean, she's not really a comedian, because I've never laughed at anything she says.
Oh no, she's dreadful.
And two is like political activist. That's classified as a career these days. You know what I mean? That's a title.
I would find that word embarrassing.
But I mean, that's the way she was introduced. But I mean, again, it's like talking about what ordinary people should and should not do, and of course, you don't have to. You could guess, like, privately educated, Oxford University. She actually was an investment banker. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So this is the thing I was talking about. Kate, what's her face, and Lionel Nation. Just with this Kate one, I've seen her in a few TV shows. She seems to be always dragged out anytime there's anything got to do with feminism. But she's so angry and aggressive. I wonder, you kind of feel a bit sorry for her. Like, I mean, she's kind of like the Owen Jones. I was going to say female version, but I mean, poor old Owen Jones, he's a bit of a soy boy. So I wouldn't really fear on him. It's more like the male version of Owen Jones. She's so aggressive. She needs help, really. She probably needs to have a good walk in the countryside and just let the fresh air fill her lungs, and get in touch with Mother Earth, forget about trying to save the world, Anyway, so let's have a look at this. And it's important. Her first answer just shows you how crazy she is, because you'll see how long-winded it goes on and it goes on and it goes on, and I don't know what kind of point she's saying. So let's have a look. I'll start it here now.
Kate Smurthwaite, and political activist and comedian, joins us now, as well as Lionel, legal analyst and media commentator. Thanks both for coming onto the programme. Now, Kate, we'll start with you. We mentioned you. You're a comedian, obviously. Is it ever right to censor a performance?
Well, I think that it's kind of misleading here to suggest that what has happened in this case is a question of censorship. There are lots of comedy clubs, many of which I play at, that have a behavioural agreement in place. One of my favourite clubs in London is a place called Quantum Leopard. I'm there as often as I possibly can be, and they have a document which they ask comedians to sign, which says don't be racist, don't be sexist, don't be homophobic. And, the vast majority of comedians go, well, I never would anyway, so it's absolutely trivial for me to sign this document. And to be honest, if you have to stop and go, what? They're asking me not to be sexist? How could they? Then maybe it's about time that you sort of thought about the fact that it's 2018 and checked out what your material is. I find it weird that we're presenting this as though somebody's being censored. The fact is that by agreeing to come on your show, I've agreed not to swear on air. And if I didn't want to do that, I could have not come on your show, and your other guests are bound by the same thing. The idea that free speech should be about you can say anything whenever you want and there will be absolutely zero consequences to that. That's not how it works. You can say anything, and free speech says, you won't be imprisoned for that. But if every time you see a cup of coffee you shout, I hate coffee, it's disgusting, well, you won't be working in a coffee shop next week, because much as you might be exercising your free speech, in fact, your free speech is impinging your ability to do your job. Now, I think that it's absolutely right to draw some lines about what is and isn't okay at an event like this. I think what is important, and the reason that I was so upset when I was excluded from performing at Goldsmiths, is that we have to be able to have a conversation about what those lines are. And, if this comedian felt that there was something in this agreement that he wasn't happy with because, for example, it said don't criticise the government, and he felt that he really wanted to do that because there's something they're doing that's really immoral, I would absolutely be on his side saying, yeah, of course, you should go and you should be allowed to have a conversation about what is and isn't the right line to draw. But the idea that we should never draw any lines, I mean, we draw lines all the time. There's an advertising standards body. Films have ratings on them. Every single thing that we broadcast, we have a discussion about what is and isn't the right thing to put on that broadcast. And in this case, they've drawn some rules. Now, they're not the same rules that I would have drawn, but many of them seem fairly reasonable. And, they're their choice of rules. I think it's fair enough for him to be able to have a conversation about what should or shouldn't be in the rules. But the idea of just going, there have to be no rules, we demand anarchy, I mean, it's just a nonsense. I don't believe for a second that that's what's happening. What I think is happening is that it's essentially he's making a fuss as a publicity stunt because he thinks he can get a little bit of mileage out.
Lionel, I'm going to bring in Lionel, and if we broaden the discussion about censorship in general, because we've this debate, it's a hot issue, isn't it? What is censorship? Should people be restricted with their freedom of speech? And I ask you, Lionel, if you were having to sign a piece of paper restricting your views and your freedom of speech, would you do it?
Well, the first rule I wish we would allow here, perhaps I would consider, is brevity in answering the question. But I digress.
You're watching people who pretend they have convictions, and they don't. And like a discerning audience member can tell anybody comedy savvy can tell the difference between the frauds and the real thing.
Well, like ordinary people can tell the difference. They know when the
your discerning audience member can tell.
Anyway,
but I tell you who can't tell, the people in the industry and the other comedians.
Yeah.
Everything's held together by a tissue of lies, and that's why I fucked everybody up when I did those awards. When I did those awards, I was playing a whistleblower. So this is all held together by some bullshit social agreement that you don't talk shit about other comedians. But if you don't talk shit about other comedians, how the fuck is this problem in comedy? The first thing you have to do is recognize there is a problem in comedy. And if you compare the quality of comedy this country once produced with what we're putting out now, there's a serious fucking problem in comedy. And so you need a whistleblower to come out there and say, everybody's sucking everybody else's dick here. And I know you all feel good about yourself and you get your therapeutic moment in the sun. But, for those of us who actually regard comedy as almost a holy principle, I'd like to see you all fuck off so we can have comedy again,
Yeah. I mean, I wonder about the free market, because these people weren't really supported from behind, with their political activism. I mean, she's all this, for example, this woman, she's always on TV, but she couldn't be making much of a career in a free market, comedy scene. I don't know. I mean.
Well, I have a theory lately, because like I said, there's these Johnny-come-latelys on the right-wing thing. There's a guy that used to be called the Pun Man, right? And he dressed up as a superhero, and he went on stage and he told puns, which is okay if that's your thing. He voted Remain, and then very recently, ironically, right around the time that Comedy Unleashed started to become a big show, all of a sudden he's got a show called Right Wing Comedian, and I have this theory that if it turned out that he was a fraud, or you said, okay, are you truly right-wing, or is this just kind of you think you might have a market for this, that he would justify it by saying, well, it's right-wing to be a capitalist and engage in the free market. That's his get out of jail free card. Said, well, I'm not really right-wing, but I'm using the free market to sell a product, even though it's a fraudulent product. The free market, capitalism, I believe, it's a neutral thing, and there should be ethics behind it. But nowadays, we sell shit. You turn on the television, it's just the most decrepit programming ever. But you can hide behind the free market and say, well, we're selling a product. What's wrong with that? It's the free market, but there's no ethics behind it. Because you sell this shit. and as you sell it, the implication is this is the best we can do as the human race. As the human race, we landed people on the moon, built bridges, skyscrapers, civilizations. This is the best the human race can offer. We've evolved, man.
Yeah, but it's
horrifying.
Is that not just humans are generally fucking morons, really? You know?
I don't think so. That's the optimism of the satirist. Morons. I think we're conditioned by, we're just conditioned, and I think we need to break out of that conditioning, and that's where common sense comes in. For all this blah blah blah, the trans people and change the language and all the shit like that. You need somebody to come. This is why this is why Donald Trump is hated, because he came in like a wrecking ball and said, stuff like no more trans in the military, and we have to have a border, otherwise, really basic shit. Like you have to have a border, otherwise people come in and get on your benefits and bust your economy, and people aren't speaking the language that you grew up with anymore. I mean, this is common sense shit, and it's the other stuff that's complicated.
Yeah, well, 10 years ago that would have been perfectly normal politics, really. So just one more question on comedy. Can comedy change the world? I mean, I know, like, when I was growing up, Bill Hicks was, and George Carlin, maybe Lenny Bruce, I don't know. They really had a message, and young people just listen.
I never really was a Bill Hicks. I never understood the Bill Hicks thing, but Lenny Bruce.
I love Bill Hicks.
See, Lenny Bruce Lenny Bruce set it all in motion, and that's why I never really was a George Carlin fan either, to be honest with you. I like Richard Pryor and Steve Martin myself, but Lenny Bruce actually got arrested and served time, and by the end of his career, he could only play 2 clubs in the entire United States, and so they really shoved him off to the corner and said, and so Lenny Bruce kind of, I hate to use the word martyr, but he really kind of was a martyr for free speech, and then George Carlin came along just a few years later, and he did it when it was safer, and so he was able to build a long-lasting career out of it, whereas Bruce wasn't. He was also a junkie, Bruce, but still, I always respect the originators.
So can comedy change the world? Is it?
Absolutely. Do you know Ayaan Hirsi Ali?
No.
She's a Somalian woman that escaped.
Oh yeah. This woman she lives in the Netherlands, I think, or
She used to, but then the Netherlands kicked her out, and she had to go to America.
It was too dangerous, I think, in Holland. Actually, she had to escape for safety, didn't she?
Yeah. Even a free country like Holland, after a while, had to wash their hands of her. How sick is that? But she has I think it's called Infidel. And in her book, I'm pretty sure it's Infidel, and she writes. I'm paraphrasing this, but I in 2015 I would close my show every night with this quote, and her quote was, "I believe in the world-changing power of blasphemy," and I just love that image. And to me, that's what comedy is supposed to be. It's supposed to be punk. It's supposed to be blasphemous, and political correctness and all this other shit. It's a religion. So as much as people say, "Oh, we don't go to church anymore, and we've advanced beyond the, having to say the rosary or whatever," political correctness and identity politics and multiculturalism is all a fucking religion.
Yeah, it's a cult.
And it is the job of the comedian to go out there and to be blasphemous. And by being blasphemous, you breathe this great sigh of relief in the form of a laugh. And you laugh at the stupidity and the ridiculousness of it all. So absolutely, comedy can change the world and should be changing the world. This shit we've got now is not comedy, though. It's a religion. They're just more deacons and priests of this new fucking religion.
Yeah. That's a good point. Okay, it's a bit feedback there. Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Well, as I said, I have this going anyway, so just a few more questions. Sorry, Will.
No worries.
So just about your videos, I really admire your honesty in them.
Appreciate it, man.
You do bare your soul. I think that's the strength of your videos, because it's kind of refreshing to see ordinary man talking about reality, whereas the world of these famous people on TV and their fake lifestyles. None of it is real. All these celebs. So it's kind of refreshing to see someone so honest. Is that a kind of like a form of therapy for you? Is it getting it all off your chest to the masses?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I mean, I started those videos. I never went to reveal who I actually was. That's why I did all those characters. And I started those videos a few months before the Trump election in 2016. And I only did it as a way of saying, like, look, please go out and vote for Donald Trump. And I think I initially called him the Trump Year's Diary. And then I realized I was bored about talking about politics. Because what you say about politics, that once upon a time, it was the goal of art to transcend politics. You got away from the left, and you took it somewhere else. That wasn't right nor left. It was just some weird cosmic thing, And I think that's what it is. I think I just kind of as a habit, I just kept making them, and then they weren't the Trump Year's Diary anymore. It was just whatever the hell was going on in my head at the moment,
Yeah.
I think I like them sometimes too because it forces me to improvise, and to see if I can just get out there. I did a gig one night in Birmingham, and I was on stage in London. I had to get on the train, go right to Birmingham, and they wanted me to headline. And I was supposed to do 30 minutes, and I had absolutely no plan. And I went up there. It was a really great show, and I was on for an hour, and I had absolutely no plan. And I was just, I like it when I can do something like that. It makes you feel kind of like powerful, almost,
Well, it's the same for me, like, because my little channel, I know it's not a huge thing or anything, but I don't particularly want to put my face on screen or, but I think it's where we're coming at, like, that you have something to say and you want to say it and as honestly as you can, but because we don't have a media, you turn on your TV and it's giving you something that is rubbish. I mean, it's getting to the stage where we make our own news, we make our own TV shows, we make our own radio podcasts, that's it. Because the alternative is just rubbish, and you can't, you drive you crazy shouting at the TV sometimes. So rather than doing that, just talk to like-minded people on the internet, and that's it.
Are we on? We're rolling, and I'm going to call this one Frank and Franken because you.
How do you do, sir?
How do you do? Good to see you, brother. Good to see you again. And let's start off with you said something in the car on the way over.
About movies?
No, it was about the dog. You had a dog that got in a fight with the neighbor's dog?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us that story? It's my friend Frank, by the way.
When I was young, I had a little dog. I lived on the corner of a road, and I had a little terrier dog. And there was a guy lived on the other side of the road, and he had a little terrier dog. And every time these two dogs met, they fought back.
Yeah.
And eventually, my dog died. And I was so fond of that dog. I had a waistcoat made out of its skin. And every time I met the other dog, the hair used to stand up on my waistcoat.
Lovely, man. That was a good little bit of dark humor to start off with.
And I had a lovely little Pekingese.
Okay.
And it killed a Great Dane. Stuck on his throat.
Nice. Start with a little bit of the macabre. Of course, this is my friend here. People are looking forward to this one. I talked to a couple people today. They said they were looking forward to seeing this one. Franken. We got an audience of about roughly 50 people. But I met you, I was going to come over and teach you piano.
You were.
And then we ended up just becoming mates.
That's right.
And hanging out, having a cup of tea, shooting the shit, talking about music.
And you're always welcome, and I still want to learn the piano.
You will get there. We started with Fats Domino's, Ain't That a Shame?
Yeah.
And,
he's dead now,
Oh, I know that, yeah.
Not long ago.
I didn't kill him. Had nothing to do with it.
I was a nice man. He was a nice man.
You made me cry.
When you say good.
I want to ask you then, I mean, it could be used as a stick to beat you, I mean, if you're giving your soul to the nation or whatever, and, like you said, the comedy world, it's a bit dog eat dog. Do you ever get people saying, oh, I heard you on your podcast, and...
What, criticism?
Yeah, do people say, like, oh, I didn't like what you said there, and, like, they're taking your honesty to beat you with, like, as a stick to beat you?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, but I used to care a lot more. I think you really care. Like, if I got some criticism, it really, like, fucking cunt, I'd get like... And now I just, you just have to, I don't know. I definitely don't care as much as I used to. I think that's because I've taken such a beating with the blacklist, and when you see hypocrisy like that firsthand, it really does make you. I don't know. You think you want these things, right? Like when I was a little kid, it was like, I want to be on television. I want to, be nice to be floating around in first class and stuff like that. And because I'm working class, there's always something about me that's always even though I might have wanted it, I always looked at it a bit suspiciously as well. But when you really get to know these people and you see how they act, and you know, so and so was left wing yesterday, but now he's right wing today, or just the scummy behavior of these people in the comedy world, it almost makes you kind of glad that you're not, you know, entrenched in that world, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I do miss traveling. I do miss, you know, one night you'd be in Manchester, the next you'd be in New York or whatever. That was nice, you know, and making people laugh and whatever. But when you think of the people behind the scenes, not just behind the scenes, but on the stages as well, and the whole, they're disgusting people by and large. They're just, it's a very decrepit whorehouse, you know, of frail egos and people, and people who think they've got something to say. I mean, they're the worst, man.
Yeah. Well, I think, like, at least with the internet, I mean, I feel as the audience finds you rather than you know, looking for it. Like, I mean, if you've something to say and you're honest about it, you will build your own audience, and they more or less will be people that want to support you, as opposed to people on, you know, the liberal elite kind of thing. Like, they're all getting, I think a lot of them are getting funded and paid, and you know, they're all getting well supported, and mates of mates. I'll get you on TV, I'll get you that job, I'll help you, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You know, it's not honest.
I mean, I only compliment people if I think that they've done something good, you know. And in the comedy world, it's, you know, I can't fake laugh, you know, and I might have been able to get a lot farther along if I I really like your stuff, and you know, but the truth is, most comedy I've seen in the 20 years I've been doing it is pretty unremarkable, you know. And it sounds very snobbish, but that's the thing. I mean, there was only one Peter Cook, you know, and if you set the bar on comedy of like, you know, Peter Cook, Chris Morris, and you've got this pantheon of great people that you admire, it's very hard to go out to your average comedy night and say everybody did so good. And yet that's the mentality that you kind of have to have in show business, is everybody was so good, and you keep your thoughts to yourself. And it's not just keeping your thoughts to yourself. It's not just, you know, keeping quiet. It's actually having to do a bit of fakery and say, I really love what you had to do, you know. But I've never been able to do that. And it's funny because of all the characters I play, the one I've not been able to do is the insincere networker. It's funny. It's so, just even adopt that, it's just a horrible. Yeah. It's repulsive.
Well, you mentioned Peter Cook. I mean, he would get a lot of great material today in England.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
So just to touch on like your opinions on Brexit. I mean, do you get, like, people say you're a Yank? What are you talking about? It's none of your business.
I got a little bit of that right off the bat. I was telling everybody to vote Brexit, and I got a few people say, please say about politics. You know, I would get some of that. You know, this is our affair, you know, and I don't give a fuck if it's your affair or not, because I think it's better for Yanks.
Yeah.
The way I saw Brexit was it would be the perfect thing for an Anglophilic Yank, because all of a sudden, you know, these fucking idiots and you know, who run the country here would go, oh shit, there's another direction we could be looking. You don't have to fucking look next door. I mean, I thought, you know, if Brexit's done right, they can look across the Atlantic Ocean and discover, oh god, here's some people who fucking saved their asses in World War I and II. You know, and Beatles and Elvis, and we could reignite that. Maybe fucking have a cultural revolution. Who knows?
Well, the thing is, like, people say it's none of it's like, I would get it, like, why are you always talking about Donald Trump, like, and you're not American? But it's like, it's not really about that. It's more like what's happening across the world to working class communities. I mean, I don't see the big difference what's happening in blue collar state like Pennsylvania and what's happening in my little town. You're still getting crushed by, you know, the evils of globalization, you know.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
So that's, I mean, I think with Trump, it's kind of, and with Brexit coming so soon, the two of them together, I mean, I think it's given confidence to ordinary people. Like, yes, we can speak our mind through the ballot box, and there are people that are results in politics that will speak for us and show us our opinion, because otherwise we don't have any opinion, not on the TV or the airwaves. But
it was absolutely beautiful, and you know, I'd never voted before in my life. You know, when Reagan was around, I wasn't old enough to vote, and that was the first time I ever voted, was for Trump. because I thought, finally, I can't believe somebody's actually speaking. See, I just kind of just assumed that the political class was always they were always going to be what they were, and, you know, why try to expect anything from them to change? And then all of a sudden this guy comes around and this is stupid. You know, I love that. Like, this is stupid. That's common sense. When he's talking about trans in the military, I remember that because my dad was in the military, and I remember seeing that photo of these men dressed up like female officers, and I thought, how the fuck are you going to defeat a retarded, backwards, draconian ideology like you know, radical Islam if this is the image you're putting out about the United States military? And so when he comes out and says this is stupid, or you know what I really love when he said the problem with political correctness is it takes too long. Do you remember when he said that?
No, but
and all the snobs went after him and they said, "Oh yeah, Donald Trump says it does take too long."
Right.
You know how slow things are now because you have to stop and figure out what pronoun to call somebody, or you know, or whether or not this will be wrong to wear this type of hat because it'll offend a Mexican supposedly, when it's really a white person in Cambridge you're offending on behalf of Mexicans. Everything is slow and stupid.
Well, I think what I was going to say, I think like the reason he's on like Trump is because he's plain speaking. He speaks like an ordinary guy. Like he uses, you know, rough language. You know, I mean, it's not all clean shaven and all polished. You know, but he in one way that works because people remember the sound bites. You know, they remember the wall. And I mean, like even something as simple, I'm a nationalist, and that's it. He left it at that. You know, I mean, that's speaking to his people, really. You know.
Under Republican leadership, America is winning again. America is respected again because we are putting America first. We're putting America first. It hasn't happened in a lot of decades. We're putting them first. We're taking care of ourselves for a change, folks. Thank you. I like that guy, but not that much. Not that much. But radical Democrats want to turn back the clock toward the rule of corrupt, power-hungry globalists. You know what a globalist is, right? You know what a globalist is. A globalist is a person that wants the globe to do well, frankly, not caring about our country so much. And you know what? We can't have that. You know, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist. Nationalist. Nothing else. Use that word. Use that word.
Isn't it weird that somewhere along the way the word nationalism became synonymous with Nazi?
Yeah.
I always tell people I'm a nationalist.
But who defeated the Nazis? Who defeated? It was like England on it with Churchill, and that was all patriotism, you know?
Absolutely. You cannot win a war like that without patriotism.
Yeah, it was, you know. So,
but nowadays the mentality is if Hitler came back, and you know, which he has in many ways, I would say that's a different story. But you know, if Hitler came back and it was all German nationalism, the mentality on the other side would be, okay, let's not be nationalist, let's be the globe, and we'll defeat Hitler. And that doesn't work like that. You have to have, you know, if you go in a boxing match, you have to have another person, you have to have an opponent who's an individual smacking the fuck out of the other guy, you know?
So I was just, with regards to Brexit, I've seen it twice now recently. They're talking about, like, with the Remain people, they're saying that because it was on Sky TV, they were talking to what's his name, Rikus Mogg, or I can't remember.
Rikus Mogg, yeah.
And they actually asked him, and I think it's ridiculous to ask him, but like there should be another vote because over 1 million people have died since the last election. You know, totally ridiculous thing.
They want a people's vote.
They had one. They may have missed it. Perhaps they were asleep on the 23rd of June 2016. We had a vote. 17.4 million people voted to leave. What they want is a loser's vote, a vote of people who never wanted to leave and don't accept that in a democracy, when you lose, you have to accept the result. That's how democracy works.
Do you not accept there have been material changes since then?
No.
Not least 1.5 million people, I'm told, have died since then, and the vote was, I think, something like 750,000 in favour of leaving the European Union.
No, it wasn't. It was over 1 million in favour. The 750,000 is the swing figure of people you would need to have changed your mind.
Nevertheless, 1.5 million people have died since the vote was taken place.
This is a really eccentric view, if I may say so. This would be true after every...
It's put forward by the opposite side to you, and we have to respect both sides, of course.
You're very fair-minded, and you always put the other side. But you could say this after every election, couldn't you? You could say, on the May the 3rd, so many people voted, and one party won by X votes, and on May the 10th, so many people have died, and therefore you should have another vote. But democracy doesn't work like that. You have a vote on a specific day. Those who turn up to vote exercise their democratic right. The decision is then made, and once that decision is made, it's implemented. To say different people might have voted on another election day doesn't actually make any sense.
And then there was someone had a tweet campaigning against Brexit. It was really, I read it out. On this chilly Friday night, something to cheer you up. Since June 2018, 1.5 million young people would be born, or turned 18, sorry. Yeah. And old Brexiteers are dying at the rate of 8,000 a month. I mean, that's the mentality. They're celebrating death, you know. Yeah. And it's not really classy, but I mean, the idea of it, like, it's, you know, I mean, so is that the way politics is going to do? They're going to say, like, we'll have to replay it because a certain demographic have died, you know, so we'll have to replay this election. I mean...
I've seen anything more contemptuous, a government more contemptuous of its own people. In America, you could say that too, because in America, when Trump got elected, people have been working for, 2 years now to say that Russia influenced him, you know, and another was I remember nobody gave a fuck about Russia until the election. If you asked your ordinary person on the street what they thought about Russia, nobody cared.
I still think they don't care. I still think they don't care.
Well, they don't. No, they don't care. They don't care. But Russia was just this kind of, you know, weird country from the Cold War days, and all of a sudden he got elected. Somebody put it out there that Russia influenced the election. Now all the liberals hate Russia for some reason. They'll use Russia as a, you know, as an arguing point, and it's even worse with this country. I mean, they had a referendum. They elected a Remainer to usher in Brexit, and it's depressing. And, you know, really the only way out of it is because there's no way I can influence Theresa May or whoever's in power. I can say what I want, which is I want Boris Johnson to be PM, and then from there I'd like to see Jacob Rees-Mogg step up to the plate. You know, and somebody actually with a sense of humor, who's politically incorrect, who's going to call people in burqas letterboxes. So we can actually take care of this shit. But I can't do anything about it other than just, you know, at the end of the day, it'll drive you insane. And I think it's driven everybody else insane because you go on Twitter, it's right wing, left wing, right wing, left wing. And all you can do is really transcend it and just do something, you know, interesting.
Yeah, well, it might be, the way it's going, it might be the EU might cave in on itself with the European elections next year. I mean, you have Hungary, Poland, Italy. So it might just cave in itself, and it might be in the long term irrelevant, you know. So I just a few more questions. So I got into you simply from John Waters' interview. That's the first time because it came up in my YouTube. You know, to have the videos on the side, and I was probably looking at something with John Waters, and then I seen your video. So you've got his new book. You've been reading it.
That's right. I haven't started it yet, but
you haven't started it. Okay.
No, I do have his new book, but and by him actually.
Yeah, but it gets back to what we were saying, like it's so far apart. I mean, you grew up in small town America. He grew up in a very small town in the west of Ireland. Yeah. Ordinary people with the same concerns, you know, and the liberal elite are trying to take you down more or less, you know, country bumpkin kind of thing. So how'd you meet John, and what do you think? Like as I said, the similarities. I mean, it's.
Oh, you know what? I mean, it was. I don't have a lot of examples in my life where I just formed an instant friendship with somebody. You know, I'm a very kind of reserved. It doesn't sound like that, but I am generally a reserved kind of guy when it comes to friendships and stuff. And we went to a panel at the Battle of Ideas in 2016, and the panel was something like Trump and the New Populism or whatever. And I'd never seen the guy before. And I was so excited because, you know, I assumed there'd be some Trump supporters there. And I went in, and he was sitting he was with his wife, and it was about 2 people down from me in the same row.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody on the panel, they had it was supposed to be a wide range of, you had like the Spectator on one end and the Guardian on the other. And they were all going around the panel saying, Trump won't win, and here's why he won't win. He won't win, and he won't win.
Yeah.
And one of the guys said something about, he quoted Bruce Springsteen, because Bruce Springsteen, you know, John used to be a rock and roll columnist for Hot Press.
Hot Press, yeah.
That's right. And he said that quote about Bruce Springsteen not liking Donald Trump or something. And when it came time for Q&A, John Waters' hand went up first, and he got the microphone, and he said, I'd like to know what sort of snob Bruce Springsteen is. And he said something about that he would slag off the very working class voters that he supposedly idolizes in his own songs. And I was kind of pumping my fist going, fuck yeah, you know, and there was such anger in his voice, like righteous anger. And when he passed the microphone to me, because it was my turn, he looked at me and he kind of, almost with a wink in his eye, he said, don't be too angry now. And it was just, from there, it was instant friendship. And we've had instant friendship since then.
Yeah.
Because you rarely see that. Like, look, a lot of people are either all head or all heart. You know, so you either have these stupid liberals out there doing yoga and, you know, love everybody, EU, Remain, or you have these cold intellectuals where they're just head, and they'll tell you a million and one reasons why Brexit should happen when we all fucking know it should happen. But you rarely see that fusion of the head and the heart, and I saw that with John. Somebody who's just as angry as I am, just as intellectual, and that's such a rare thing nowadays.
I was in a shop in Dunleary in Dublin, and there was like maybe half a dozen people there. And I meet an old colleague, a journalist, a woman who you know, we had a kind of a, you know, a strange relationship, very unique in Irish journalism, whereby we disagreed, but we didn't really hate each other.
Sure.
That's unusual.
Very rare.
That's very rare.
Absolutely.
But she said, oh, hi, Johnny. And I said, oh, hi, Kate. So then there's a kind of moment where she says, you know, she kind of brings up the Trump moment, you know, and she's supposed to, oh, I don't know, you know, the way things are going now in the States, you know, it's very worrying, isn't it? And I said, I think it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And the woman who's behind the counter says, I think it's going to be great. And another guy over there said, you know, I actually quite like that guy. And the woman I'm talking to, suddenly, she says, actually, I like him too. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
I really do. So everybody, it was unanimous. And this is a really interesting phenomenon, where you see the pressure of the propaganda, which kind of tells people to say certain things that they don't believe. Because they want to be approved, because they assume in advance that everybody in the shop is going to have the same opinion, and they're going to be cool with it. And so when somebody just breaks, just one person breaks ranks, and everybody says, me too.
It's a beautiful phenomenon.
Isn't it?
When you told me that, it goes through the comic filter. And I always try to see how to turn something into a bit. And I just love the idea of that being like, you know, oh, it's going to be grim. It's grim. It's really good. I just think it's going to be great. Then the sun shines. You almost see like the Pythoness, the clouds parting and stuff like that.
Did you see where he called somebody a bollocks? I think it was RT.
Yeah, Eamon Dunphy, he called him a bollocks, yeah.
You're a fucking bollocks, and he fucking stormed off. I go, fuck yeah. That's fucked up.
Yeah, well, I mean, Eamon Dunphy, he's one of these guys that rails against the system, but he's part of the system, you know. He never.
That's right.
I mean, he criticizes the government all the time, but like, I mean, he is a champagne socialist, I think, you know. So I'll just finish up then. So I'm just saying, like, you got a lot. You mentioned it a few times. You've a lot of Irish supporters. I wonder, is that one of the reasons that video probably drew a lot of them in? I suppose.
You know, that might have, because I think it's over 3,000 views now. I don't have many videos with 3,000 views.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that was so amazing, because I'd only met him that once. We hung out that weekend. And then for some reason, we've been communicating by email. No, a friend of mine, I wrote an essay on Trump, and my friend sent that to Waters, and then we started communicating even more.
Okay.
And I said, look, I know, you know, this might be a leak, but I'm going to be in Cork. I was doing a show in Cork. And,
okay.
You know, I said, you know, I know it's a long shot because you live in Dublin, but, you know, and then sure enough, he went down to Cork and
that's a long trip, yeah.
That's it. The rest was history. But you know, the Irish built so many parts of America, and Ireland and America, I think, are they're both rebellious, and I love the rebel city of Cork.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole founding of America was built upon rebellion.
It's just a pity we didn't build our own country.
Well, you know.
Okay, so I'll just finish up.
No, you're still good though. I mean, it's possible, you know.
Yeah, it takes time, I guess.
It takes anger. It takes anger.
We have to get through the celebrating part of getting independence first. You know, we're still still partying about that.
That's right.
And so, your career to date, Will, are you pretty proud of what you've achieved, or are you still a lot on the to-do list? How's the future looking for you?
I don't know. Sometimes it's just like day to day, really. You know, like if I'm still like if I get a bunch of ideas for characters or whatever, I feel all right. You know, like as long as the characters keep coming out, I'm doing okay. You know.
It seems...
I never had a 5-year plan. You talk to a lot of these comedians. Okay, I talk to people. They actually have a 5-year plan. By year 5, they want to be working for Radio 4. I never had any of that. I just like let's just make the shit and see where it goes. You know, everywhere, every place I've got in comedy, I've gotten there in spite of the comedy industry, not because of it. I did everything wrong. It's funny. I should write a book one day, but like I never really followed any rules. If somebody said you had to show up at a club for 6 months and get to know the bookers, and I never did that. I just did the comedy, and sometimes bookers would say it's good. He gets to skip the queue.
But you seem to be the go-to man now for your opinions as an American on Brexit and Trump and stuff.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, with Sky, I think they had me on 4 times 1 month, and that was because if you Googled pro-Trump comedians, I think my name was the first one up.
That's something, I guess.
It pays to be an individual of conviction sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes.
Okay, so well, that's about it. I want to thank you once again for taking the time out to chat.
No worries, man. I appreciate it.
So if people want to find your work and what you do, is there any particular anything online that they can find, or any upcoming gigs lined up, etc.?
Well, I'm putting on a regular show. It's going to be monthly, and it's called Will Franken Speaks English. And right now it's been kind of roving around London a little bit, but we're going to get a permanent venue here very soon. So that's the big one. Will Franken Speaks English, and it's just each night is going to be a different headlining set. So it'll be a brand new 45 minutes.
Okay.
I'm nothing if not prolific, so it's going to be a fixed venue. We've done a few so far, and they're both sold out, which is quite nice. And then we're just settling down a permanent home for it, but it'll be somewhere here in London.
Okay, so let me just finish up then. Okay, well, pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, have a good one, man.
Bye.
Are we aspiring towards something really? Are we trying to elevate the discourse? Are we trying to?
Do you have to elevate the discourse, or can it be? Because I'll tell you who I really like, Peter Kay.
Yeah.
Peter Kay, because he's a northerner like me, and he's referring to stuff that we can all relate to.
It's a character as well, and I often think how a person says something is funnier than what they say. I mean, It's funny, I was actually talking to some friends. I live in the East End of London, and there's a guy who used to work for the Tony Hancock.
Oh, wow.
He was president of the Tony Hancock fan club, and every time I see him, he doesn't even say hello. He just launches right into a joke, and they're always off color. They're always inappropriate. And there's something about his voice. When he comes up to me, he says, "Did I tell you?" And I won't repeat the joke he said today, but when he said, "Well, I'll tell you." And it was everything. It's not just the joke. It's the inappropriateness of it. It's the element of shock that comes out. So I don't think that everything has to elevate the discourse. It's a bit snobbish to suggest that, and I apologize. But there's almost 2 approaches to comedy, and for me, it's an art form. It's like a calling. And I think somebody like Peter Cook, for example, a hero of mine, I think he was called. It was almost like a divinely ordained that this man had to do what he did.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people now, it's I'm going to get into comedy. I can do comedy.
Yeah.
I mean, once upon a time, I could leave this studio and tell somebody I was a comedian, and they'd go, "Oh my gosh, a comedian, wow." But now, the odds of me bumping into somebody, I got on stage, did 5 minutes, it was all right.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it.
I tell you what, I wouldn't fancy doing it, the whole stand-up thing.
I could not be an anchor. That would terrify me, because I would want to be silly about it, and you have to be very...
You do. We've got some serious stuff coming up. Well, really good to see you.
You too.
Thank you very much indeed. Loving the T-shirt.
Thank you very much.
Very appropriate.
Absolutely.